And good afternoon, everybody. It is now noon, and this is the Showdown. My name is Peter Bonadio.
And my name is Lindsay Martin. Thank you for joining us for our final show.
Yeah.
It's a bit sad.
I know, it's 12 weeks on air, and it's a bit sad wrapping it all up after
I know,
at the end
it
of the semester.
doesn't feel like that long.
No.
But yeah, it's been such a good experience. On today's show, we'll be looking at gender bias and women in leadership roles. We'll also be looking at the recent controversies surrounding tennis pro Maria Sharapova.
And that's not all, Lindsay. If we stick around a little bit later on, we have a surprise guest coming on the show. So we'll be staying tuned for that. We'll find out later on. But first, it's over to the news with Liam Connors. How are you, Liam?
Hey,
Not
Liam.
too bad, thanks. In breaking news, horrifying witness accounts are starting to emerge after an apparent explosion at an Ariana Grande gig in the UK has claimed the lives of at least 19 people and injured almost 50 others. Manchester police say the scene is currently being treated as a terrorist incident until police know otherwise. Staff at the Manchester Royal Infirmary have told local media that small children were among the injured, as ambulances could be seen speeding to the children's emergency department. The concert just finished, with lights turning on and people gradually starting to take their way out when the explosion in the foyer was heard. The singer is yet to comment, and it is not known whether she will continue on all dates of her Dangerous Woman tour due to come to Australia in September. We will provide updates on this incident if any new information emerges during the headlines. In other news, Victoria Police are calling on the public to help find 3 teenage girls, Alicia Nguyen, Jennifer Lai and Julie Lee, who were last seen at a residence on Highfield Road, Carnley, about 4 p.m. on Saturday. The 3 girls are from Melbourne's northwest. Police and their families are concerned for their welfare due to the young age and significant time they have been missing. Police are asking the public to come forward with any information on the missing girls. Alicia wears glasses, is about 152 centimetres tall, and has a medium build. She was last seen wearing a red hooded jumper, jeans, and white canvas shoes. Jennifer is described as having a slim build, brown eyes, and long black hair with blonde streaks. She was last seen wearing a black jacket, black jeans, and black purse. Julie is about 160 centimetres tall with a slim build, brown eyes, and black hair with blonde streaks. The girls are described as Asian in appearance, and they are likely to be together. A man has sustained life-threatening injuries after being struck by a car in Northcote. The incident occurred on St George's Road about 6 p.m. last night. The pedestrian, a man in his 30s, was critically injured, and an Ambulance Victoria spokeswoman said. The man was taken to the Royal Melbourne Hospital with head injuries. The driver, a single occupant of the vehicle, was uninjured and assisted at the scene. Police, who were investigating the exact circumstances of the collision, forced closure of a section of the Route 11 tram line for an hour. And that's all for the news.
Yeah, very interesting, that one last
Well, the St George's Road can be such a dangerous road. Yeah, that's horrible. Not a very happy news morning at all, Liam. Thank you. Okay, well, now for something completely different. Our very own Jared Friday is all about festivals.
He sure is, that's for sure.
He loves going to festivals, and as someone who has been to quite a few, he's put together a festival survival guide for us. And we've got uni holidays coming up.
So it's definitely a good time to have a look and see what he had to say about these festivals.
Take a look.
Hey guys, how you doing? These are my 5 tips for the festival season. Yeah, number 1 tip. Make sure you eat healthy. Don't load up on carbs. No good for drinking or anything like that. Eat healthy, eat light. Even if they are really good. Number 2, slip, soft, slap. Get the shades on. Number 3, there ain't no shower. Like a so, sure you get it in all the right places. Deodorant doesn't help. Number 4, make some friends. Number 5, hydration. It's essential to any festival. Okay guys, that about wraps up my 5 tips for survival. Follow my tips, you'll have a great time. Until next time.
And Lindsay, very interesting take on all that. Have you been to a festival before? Will this help you when you go to your next festival?
I've been to one festival in my time, and then I very quickly became a music publicist. So I got my backstage passes in, and I haven't been able to stomach crowds since. How about you?
Well, I haven't been to one, but that will definitely help me.
Yeah.
Going
Thanks,
to my
Jared.
first festival. Thanks a lot, Jared. Much appreciated. And Lindsay, you also have been looking into the idea of this gender pay gap and the decreasing number of women on boards.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that and who you've gone to speak to.
Yeah, so I did a story not too long ago, and I spoke to a couple of high-powered businesswomen because I noticed that the research was saying that there aren't that many women in leadership in business. And I wanted to know what their secret was. How did they get to the top? So I spoke to Mary Delahunty. She's a former she's still a journalist, but she was a former Labor politician. She's now the managing director of Luminosity Australia. I also spoke to Elizabeth Proust. And she is the chairman for Bank of Melbourne, Nestle, and I also spoke to Dr. Jennifer Whelan, who specialises in unconscious bias in the workplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, take a look and you can see.
Yeah.
Last year, the Australian Government's Gender Equality Agency released a scorecard which stated that 24.7% of board directors and only 16.3% of CEOs in Australia are women. In March 2017, diversity and productivity researcher Conrad Liveris found that number is decreasing. Liveris stated that there is still a gender pay gap at every level of business. Dr. Jennifer Whelan is the founder and director of Synapse Psychometrics, an organisation that specialises in the assessment of implicit thinking, including unconscious bias, stereotypes, and adaptive potential.
We talk about the role of processes like unconscious biases and those small, subtle, cumulative effects that make us more comfortable with men as leaders or see men more naturally as leaders. Does not mean women will never get into leadership. We have many wonderful female leaders. We don't have as many of them as we have male leaders still. And the further up the organisational hierarchy you go, the fewer of them there are. It is just harder. You have to be more determined. We also know some of the research now showing that women have to outperform their male counterparts by a premium factor in order to be considered as competent. So in order to receive the same kind of competency evaluation, a woman will tend to have to perform quite a lot better than a male counterpart. And so perhaps one of those descriptives of successful women leaders is that they're overachievers.
Elizabeth Proust is the chairperson for Nestle Australia and the Bank of Melbourne, and one of the country's foremost business figures. Proust says she views her gender as an asset in the workplace and believes gender quotas are a necessary measure in overcoming unconscious gender bias.
I gave a speech earlier this year in Adelaide, and part of it was about diversity on boards, and this gentleman stood up and said, "You should get there on your merit," meaning men get there on their merits, but women really have to fight harder for it. So I'm really discouraged by the use of the word. Everybody says, I want to get whatever job on my merit. But, if somebody gets in because there's a quota or a target and they can do the job, fine by me. And I think that We still have about 20% of the top boards filled by women. And the picture at the next level, chief executives, is dire. It's about 3 women in the top 100 Australian ASX companies.
Advocacy initiatives like the Australian Human Rights Commission's Male Champions of Change have begun the conversation around gender diversity in the workplace. HR professional Dr. Jennifer Whelan says that while these initiatives are important, there needs to be less talk and more action.
I think, you know, the messenger is as important as the message in terms of trying to gain as much positive engagement around the issue of diversity and inclusion, both in organisations and in the social context more broadly. And absolutely having senior male experienced leaders speaking up for the issue is incredibly important, given the audience that we're trying to appeal to, who are still largely senior male leaders in organisations. But I'm not sure that it has translated into the degree of practical change that we would have hoped for, and it may even give the false impression that we've achieved more progress than we actually have.
I think the jury's still out. I think it's really important that the people like Elmer Fonke-Kupper and David Gonski, who've been speaking up on the topic, and in some cases probably embarrassing other male CEOs and chairmen on the topic, I think that's really important. But we're still not seeing a lot of change in executive ranks. I think somebody said there are more CEOs called Peter than there are women, and that tells you something about the country and the culture. So I think that the male champions of change have their place, but they need to be joined by strong women as well.
Mary Delahunty is a long-time journalist, former politician, and current managing director of Luminosity. Delahunty was the first woman in Australia to host a primetime news program at the ABC's 7:30 report, before embarking on an 8-year career in state politics.
I didn't see my gender as in any way an impediment, as I particularly got into journalism and was often the only woman in the room. I realised it could be an asset, provided I'd done the work. Sometimes you have to work twice as hard to be acknowledged as up to the job. So in recent times, I've of course been very conscious of the way there is a gendered bias, particularly when you climb higher up various ladders. And for example, in politics, it was clearly evident that it was seen to be an advantage for a political party to have a diversity of candidates to offer. And so clearly that meant women in particular. And I was very fortunate when we went into government. I was part of a cabinet that had nearly a third of women sitting around the cabinet table. But it's about power, and men who are used to power are not going to release it easily. So I've learnt that, I suppose, as I've observed the way we treat women, both in the corporate sector and particularly in public life.
One of Australia's most high-profile female leaders in recent times is previous Labor Prime Minister Julia Gillard. As the first female Prime Minister in Australian history, Dr. Whelan says Gillard's treatment by the public and her colleagues demonstrated the difficulty of disambiguating her gender from the job she did as Prime Minister.
The experience of Julia Gillard as the first female Prime Minister we've had, I think, is one of the most beautiful real-world examples of what psychologists will tend to call backlash. And backlash sounds like a strident word and a feminist word, but in actual fact we experience backlash in relation to anyone who doesn't fit our stereotypical expectations, either of their gender, of their culture, of their age. So a stereotype is an expectation or a thumbnail sketch of what we anticipate that people are going to be like, based on a snapshot of the social group that they belong to. And our stereotypes of women don't typically include things like being assertive, tough-minded, driven, independent, strong, and in fact they often don't include being in leadership. Insofar as many people will say, well, it's not that she's a woman, it's that she did a poor job of leadership. And it's very difficult for people to disambiguate between a reaction that is an unconscious emotional reaction to her violating our stereotypes and what is a perfectly valid negative appraisal of her performance as a leader. The two become inextricably linked.
Mary Delahunty was one of the few journalists granted exclusive access to Gillard during and after her Prime Ministership.
On the night she lost the Prime Ministership, Julia Gillard said in the Blue Room at her press conference that gender doesn't explain everything about her Prime Ministership. It does not explain nothing about her Prime Ministership. It explains something, and we have to study what it explains. She also said that she's proud to be the first female Prime Minister, and that it would be easier for the next female Prime Minister and the one after that and the one after that. Listening to her words that night, I couldn't feel the truth of them. I now do, with a caveat, with a warning, because what I charted during that 12 months I had access to follow the Prime Minister around, up close and personal, including being in her office during the various leadership assaults on her leadership and finally when she lost it. What I uncovered is this development of a new political template in Australia, a template that uses gender and bodily parts, as it happens, as a political weapon. And the thing that astonished me was that no one stood up against this. No one in leadership positions stood up against it. And there are many women now, both in her own party and in other parties, certainly women in the press gallery, who said we should have called it out for what it was.
And really interesting, Lindsay, because I would have thought, it would have been getting better as, obviously, as you've said, as the years go on, but it's apparently sort of plateaued and sort of stayed the same. You would have thought there would have been a bit more.
Well, it's decreased. Like at the start of the package, I mentioned that there's been new research that's saying that people, women on boards, there's less. So it's a bit odd. You would have thought that we'd be more progressive, but we're not.
And the fact that there's only 16.3% of females make up the CEO positions, that's crazy. In all of Australia, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Would you have thought it was that low?
No, I would have thought it would be a bit higher, maybe around 30 to 40%, but which is strange because you would have thought, there's obviously a lot of successful females and you would have thought that they would carry those positions.
It's interesting because, the two women that I spoke to who were in very high-powered positions, they didn't feel as though they'd really experienced much gender bias in business. Mary said that there was in journalism, but in business they didn't feel that way.
That's pretty interesting to think.
It's very interesting, and I'm not really sure what the solution is. I think, obviously being vocal and having visible role models for women who want to go into business is important. But there's a whole lot of different obstacles to get past, I think.
And what were some of the things that stood out that Dr. Whelan said to you? What were some of the...
Dr. Whelan was really interesting. I think one of the things that I really went away thinking about was this idea of unconscious gender bias. So unintentional bias, this thing of you don't mean to discriminate against a person, but it's almost ingrained in how you see the world. So, she used all these terminologies like, that women are kind of maternal or warm or, and not strong or leaders, so we associate different words with different sexes, which I just think is not in step with our society nowadays.
100%.
We're a lot more progressive than that. So why the high-powered business community isn't catching up, is a bit of a mystery.
Do you think there's a lack of opportunity for females, or do you think it's more because the board members were saying they didn't feel any bias? But do you think there is that still that lack of opportunity?
Look, seemingly not. There are supposedly all these different mechanisms for women to be able to enter the space of leadership in business, but it's the representation of women and also of different ethnicities isn't budging. So I'm of the mindset that there are some middle-aged white men who don't want to relinquish their positions, and we're going to have to wait a little bit longer before they're over the hill and it's time for a new wave of people. So that's unfortunately where things seem to be.
And where do you see this going, in the next 2 to 5 years? Like, where do you see there's going to be more positions for females at that higher end of business, or do you think it's going to stay the same?
Well, I'm no expert, Pete, but from what I can gather, just based on the interviews that I did and the reading I've been doing, as long as people are submitting research constantly and we're being transparent about it and it's getting coverage in the media, then I feel as though we should get better. We should see some improvement. So it's just a matter of keeping the conversation alive.
Yeah, exactly, definitely.
Yeah.
And 1300 is coming up next after our show, and Rachel joins us now. How are you, Rachel?
Hi, Rachel.
Hello, I'm good, thanks. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. We're starting very soon. We start at 1 o'clock.
That's right.
And it's our last show today, as
Isn't it
are the other two shows. It's really sad.
Have you had a good time?
Look, it's been great. I'm kind of relieved, but also, I'm quite upset that it is finishing, but,
I feel like we formed a bit of a family.
Yeah.
100% agree.
I mean, it's been so good working with such a great team of people, and great to mix with the shows as well.
Yeah.
So coming up, we've got Jake Kohler, our producer, hosting with Emily Jones, and she's actually made a new What's Cooking Good Looking segment. I believe she's making a smoothie bowl, which is very popular at the moment, so that should go down well.
What's a smoothie bowl?
It's like the it's kind of hipster. It's kind of like the new thing at those health food places.
Right.
It's like a lot of yogurt and seeds and things like that in a bowl.
Sounds delicious and nutritious.
It does. Very healthy. Very healthy. We've got a new ACLA, which is a current Latrobe affair. It's kind of like a bit of a skit made by Callum Misson, so that's really exciting. I love watching those. So that's in 2 parts. And our main topic for today is the closing of Nauru.
Right.
And that's happening in a few weeks. Huge topic. So Georgie, lovely Georgie, she's hosted before, and Tim will be presenting that. And I believe that it's going to be quite a very long discussion because there's just so much to cover.
There is. It's
it'll
so
be really
complex.
And there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, so
wonderful.
last show, quite a lot to go through, and it'll be really interesting for everyone watching. So tune in at 1 o'clock.
We will be. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that.
coming in.
Thank you.
And now, our last episode of the Showreel this week, Lindsay.
I love the Showreel.
And given that it is the last episode, we're going to have a look at movies of the decades.
Yes, this is Kate McDonald's picks.
Yeah.
These are her favourites.
Her favourite from 1920 to 1980. So let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Kate MacDonald, and this is the final episode of the Showreel. For the last show, I wanted to do something different, and all this semester I've been talking about new releases, but I'm really passionate about classic movies, so today I'm going to be talking about 8 films from 1920 to 1980 that I really liked. The first film I want to talk about is Wings from 1927, which actually won Best Picture at the first ever Oscar ceremony. The film stars Clara Bow, Richard Arlen, and Charles Buddy Rogers. The film is a war epic about 2 fighter pilots in World War I who are in love with the same woman. More so than the romance, though, I think this movie is about the relationship between the 2 men. The movie came out just before sound revolutionised the industry with the jazz singer, so it is silent, but I don't think it's a detriment to this film that it is silent. This movie really is an example of how they could use the lack of sound as an advantage, and for a long time was the only Oscar winner that was a silent film until The Artist came out in 2011, so it's definitely a big part of film history. Next up, I wanted to talk about 1931 City Lights, which was directed by Charlie Chaplin. The movie's about his character, the tramp, who falls in love with a blind girl that mistakes him for a rich man, and though he is poor himself, he tries to help her get money to get an eye surgery so she's no longer blind. Now, this film also is silent, but you don't really need the sound to understand the movie. You can understand it without the dialogue. It's a very simple story, but still entertaining. For the comedy alone, this film is worth watching. Really, any Charlie Chaplin movie, you should definitely check it out. And don't let the fact that it's silent prevent you from experiencing it. Next, I wanted to talk about 1940's The Philadelphia Story, which I've chosen because it's one of my favourite films, and it's in sound, so don't worry. The film stars Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart, and Jimmy Stewart actually won his Oscar for this movie. The movie's about a socialite who is about to remarry when her first husband and a reporter appear trying to cause trouble. And the movie's really about her figuring out who she's in love with and what she wants to do. The story is a little simple, but I think the characters and their chemistry really make the story interesting. The three main characters are acting legends, and this is one of my favourite movies, so I think you should watch it. The next movie I want to talk about is 1959's Some Like It Hot. It's directed by Billy Wilder and it stars Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe. The movie is set in the 1920s and is about two musicians who witness the St. Valentine's Day massacre and must hide from gangsters that are after them. And naturally they disguise themselves as women and join a girl band where they meet Marilyn Monroe's Sugar Cane. The film's obviously a comedy and I really like Jack Lemmon's performance because he seemed to embrace dressing up as a woman more and he definitely had the funniest storyline. This movie, in my opinion, also has one of the best endings of all time.
I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.
Next up, I wanted to talk about 1967's The Graduate, which starred Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft. The movie's about a graduate who's just come home from college and sort of doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. He begins an affair with an older woman, Mrs. Robinson, but then falls in love with her daughter. So the movie's kind of about him trying to figure out what he wants really in life. Something I found really interesting about this movie was Dustin Hoffman was 30 years old when he was playing the college graduate, and Anne Bancroft, who was playing the older woman, was only 36. So it really speaks volumes to the sexism in the industry. But nonetheless, the movie's great. Next, for the 70s, I wanted to talk about 1976's Taxi Driver, which I think is one of Martin Scorsese's best movies. And the movie features one of, I think, the most iconic lines ever of a movie.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
Which is just amazing. And apparently he improvised that line. The film also has a great score that kind of just gets stuck in your head by Bernard Herrmann. It was actually his last score. And you can really feel the passion that Martin Scorsese had for this movie, and it really shows on screen. Next up, I wanted to talk about 1988's Heathers, which stars Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. It's a dark comedy about a girl who is in the most popular clique in school, which is called the Heathers, but isn't really interested in the popularity contest and putting other people down. So everything changes when JD, played by Christian Slater, comes into the picture, and he sort of helps her break free from this situation which she doesn't want to be in. But the way they do that is by killing all the popular people.
I just killed my best friend.
And your worst enemy.
Same difference.
So the film definitely goes to a dark place, but it's very funny and very 80s. And I really like the dynamic between Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. They have great chemistry. And that's it for today. This has been the final episode of the ShowReel, and I'm Kate MacDonald.
How
so good.
Was that? That was so good. So many classic movies in there.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I haven't seen any of them because I'm not a movie watcher. But which ones stood out to you the most? Like, which ones were your favourites?
Well, I've seen two of them, and Katharine Hepburn is just everything. So probably, so I've seen The Graduate, which I love, and possibly, you know, the soundtrack is just as good as the movie, and I love Simon Garfunkel so much. And what else have I seen there? Oh, Taxi Driver. I mean, just such a brilliant movie. You know, the directing, as Kate mentioned, is so evident in the movie. It's just, I don't know, I'm just so blown away by Kate. Like, that segment was so brilliant, and her hair looked amazing.
The Taxi Driver is definitely one I think I need to go see.
I think we need to see all of them.
So okay.
I'm totally sold.
So yeah. Definitely going to go see all of them.
Now, you've been making some film.
Have I?
Yes, you have, Pete. But about a recent sporting controversy.
Yes, about Maria Sharapova and her return to tennis. But before we get to that, Lindsay, let's go to the news headlines with Liam. Liam, what's making news?
Have you seen any of those?
No, I haven't, actually. I'll be sure to watch them now, though.
You're a film buff. What is this?
I know.
All right. Tell us what's going on.
Thanks again, guys. In relation to the Manchester explosions, Manchester Arena has released a tweet just minutes ago claiming that the explosions occurred outside the venue in a public space. GM police have made a public statement over social media. Emergency services will be working at the scene of last night's incident at Manchester Arena and will continue to ask the public to avoid the area. There is yet to be any news on when the police will release their details on the events. After a series of seizures in Sydney, guns, ammunition, drugs and money have been taken by police and 5 alleged bikies have been arrested. The raids were a response to a violent dispute between rival outlaw motorcycle gangs, the Nomads and the Finks, police have said. A variety of weapons and drugs, including cocaine, steroids and MDMA, were all found at 15 properties searched across New South Wales over the past 5 days. In other news, Trump has arrived in Israel and met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who used the word peace 6 times in his welcoming speech for Trump. The Prime Minister talked about the US President's trip as a historic milestone on the path towards reconciliation and peace, and described a day when an Israeli Prime Minister would be able to follow in Trump's footsteps between Tel Aviv and the Saudi capital. In other news, a high-end Audi was the target of thieves who terrorised a young family in Melbourne's west. Farouk Naeem and wife Sana Farouk and their 2 young sons were sleeping in their Brookfield home in the early hours of Monday morning, when 5 masked men climbed their back fence and snuck into the house through a sliding door about 1 a.m. Police urge anyone with information to contact Crime Stoppers. Now back to the show, guys.
Thanks, Liam.
Thanks, Liam. So during the week, I spoke to Peter Mercado, who's a tennis broadcaster and also a tutor at La Trobe Uni, about what Maria Sharapova's return has, been caused. Like, we know she had the ban, she served her ban, but
Tell the people like me who don't follow the tennis what's going on. What's the setup for your story?
So Maria Sharapova has just returned from her ban for taking performance-enhancing drugs during the Australian Open last year. And she's just returned, and she was awarded a wild card into one of the biggest tournaments in the lead up to Roland Garros. So there's a bit of controversy about should she be allowed to be rewarded that wild card given that she's just come off a drug ban.
Yeah.
So let's take a look what Peter Mercado had to think about that.
Yes, because it is up to the individual tournaments to make that decision. So ultimately, the decision of wildcards rests with the tournament organisers rather than the WTA. The one with the French Open rests with the French Tennis Federation who run that tournament. So it's entirely up to them whether they want to invite her back on a wild card, and it's totally up to their discretion. And really, if you're a tournament director, it makes sense to have someone like a Maria Sharapova coming back because it brings people into the sport. Otherwise, you don't necessarily get the same crowds and the same attendance there and the same buzz around your tournament if you don't have her there. And the other thing too is it's going to be temporary because she's doing particularly well in those tournaments she gets wild cards for. So this will only be a short period of time, and if she does well in the grass court tournament she's got a wild card for, she can get direct entry into at least qualifying, if not main draw of Wimbledon anyway. So this is only going to be a temporary sort of thing that she's going to have this situation about the wild cards, but it's totally up to the tournaments to decide. She's done the time there, she puts her hand up for a wild card, it's up to them to grant it. Well, if you cheat, you go through a process and you're found guilty and you serve a penalty. And then once that penalty is complete, you're allowed to come back again. And that's all that's happened here. So it's not rewarding her for the fact that she cheated and she got away with it, because she didn't. She actually did serve her time, she went through a process, and now she comes back like any other player and makes those decisions as to whether she wants to apply for a wild card or not. And it's up to the tournaments to make that decision. I think, if you go through the process of, all the other offences in tennis, the ones that get caught, get punished. The ones who are allowed to come back just go back into the process like everyone else. Well, it would, yeah. And again, it's the judgment call of the tournament organisers to decide whether that happens. And yeah, it would obviously be lower profile. It wouldn't hit the headlines as much as the Maria Sharapova one has. And relatively speaking, these sort of offences are few and far between in tennis anyway. So the initial offence wouldn't necessarily cause the same ripples. And of course it's going to be different for a player ranked 70 as opposed to a player who's been number one in the world and won a whole heap of Grand Slam titles. And yeah, they're the ones that the fans want to see. So I guess it's a little bit of a different situation because of the player that we're actually talking about. Well, we know for a fact that Maria Sharapova doesn't necessarily, interact with the other players on the tour anyway. So she's not there as a popularity contest. And it was always going to happen that if you create that sort of image of yourself in the locker room, that the players aren't necessarily going to warmly welcome you back anyway. So those comments weren't surprising, but what else does she need to do here? It's that thing of you've done the time, after doing the crime, you've gone through that process and you've come back. She couldn't care less, Maria, whether Bouchard, whatever she's saying about it. And she's just there, she's not there to win friends, she's there to win titles and tournaments. So it wouldn't affect her one little bit. And yeah, okay, they're going to have that impression of her and say, okay, everything from here is going to be tainted, but she's going to be tested more than any other athlete along the way. The circumstances surrounding the whole issue from the Australian Open, missed out by a couple of months, it was her own fault, she's admitted that, put her hand up and said, right, I've done it. She served the time and now she can come back. So they can brand her whatever she likes. But if she comes back to where she was, well then fair play to her. I think her ranking will continue to rise where she'll just get direct entry into events and slams and she'll perform pretty well from there. Might be a few little bumps along the way, but her trajectory is going to go back up again and she'll be, top 100, top 50 and then...
And Mitch and Jared join us now. What did you guys think about what Peter had to say about that?
I thought he made some very good points. I mean, I get the stance that people take where Sharapova is a so-called cheater and all that, but the tournaments are looking for the marquee players, the people who are going to bring in the money. And I think it's fair enough that they want to bring Sharapova in because she is going to bring revenue into the tournament. So I agree with him.
Yeah, I think that when he touched on you got to look at the WTA as more of a business model than anything. They've got to bring in the revenue and flip the coin. So you have to have the big names there. She's a former #1 overall, and if it's something happened to like a Nadal or a Djokovic or Federer, you're not going to be wanting to attend an event without them in a year to come.
But are the straights that dire that we neglect our ethics?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like you look at Eston's. They've had that support come back.
Oh, you have to bring up Essendon.
Oh, I didn't want to, but yeah, I think you can still have that support come back, and yeah, obviously ethics has to take a huge role in sport.
Yeah,
and that's where you can kind of have that disparity between looking at it as a business and looking at what's right for the viewer and for the sport itself.
I can see that point of view, but I think the biggest thing that's getting me is the fact that if this was someone ranked 50 to 100, you wouldn't get. No way would they get a wild card.
True.
Even if it wasn't that tournament like Stuttgart, which is pretty big, like if it was one of those, the international tournaments that WTA run, they wouldn't be getting the wild card.
They're using controversy.
And their season probably would have been, their careers probably would have been over.
Well, it's interesting to see that she hasn't even gotten a wild card into the French Open, and she's I don't know if she's going to get into Wimbledon either. So it's going to be interesting to see the big the Grand Slams, the biggest tournaments of the year. They're not giving her the kind of space and ability to come back that these small tournaments are, and I guess it'll be interesting to see which tournament she does get the wild cards into.
And I think the French Open took their stance. I think she may, depending on how she goes at the wild card event that she got for a lead-up tournament to Wimbledon, she may be able to sneak into qualifying. So maybe she might be able to get into Wimbledon then, and then hopefully she'll progress throughout the year. But the players are a bit sort of divided. Majority are leaning towards I'm not fair. Let's take a listen to what Eugenie Bouchard had to say.
I don't think that's right. She's a cheater, and so to me, I don't think a cheater in any sport should be allowed to play that sport again. It's so unfair to all the other players who, do it the right way and are true. So. I think from the WTA it sends the wrong message to young kids, cheat and we'll welcome you back with open arms. So I don't think that's right. And, definitely not someone I can say I look up to anymore because it's definitely ruined it for me.
And she was pretty firm on what she had to say, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was fired up about it, and you saw the match they played at the Madrid Open. She was very fired up when she won. In my opinion, it was a little bit arrogant. The way she went about after the match point, she won. She turned to her box and kind of gave this weird smirk. I don't know what to call it, but it was a bit of a weird way to kind of celebrate a victory.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I thought that she's now become this face for like this anti-Sharapova in tennis. So yeah, and then that's a lot of weight on her shoulders. But I think the way she's taking it at the moment is probably not as professional as some people would like to see. But obviously she has to take some sort of stand.
Yeah. Do you see this hindering Maria Sharapova? Or we'll just forget about this. What do you reckon will happen?
I don't think so. I think she's a champion, and she's playing good tennis. Like she isn't. She's taken a year off, but she's been working hard, and she's been working to get back onto the tour. And I think she'll get a couple of games under her belt. She'll get a bit of confidence, and she'll be back at the Grand Slams in no time, in my opinion.
And lastly, if she does win a Grand Slam, with now Serena having her baby, she'll be off the tour for a while. Yeah. If she does win a Grand Slam, do you think? What would you make of that?
I'd be very happy to see her come back and win it. I think, in my opinion, I understand that she has broken the rules, and I think she understood that as well. But I think she's done the time. She took the year off, like she was told to, and she's come back and she's worked hard to get back to the spot. And if she wins a Grand Slam, that's great by her.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'd say that if she does manage to make her way eventually into a Grand Slam final and take one out, that'd be great. If it's within the first 12 months from now, it might bring a few headlines, but I think after that, people might just go back to
it's going to
supporting her.
Definitely interesting to see what plays out for the rest of the year.
Wouldn't it be great to see a Genie Bouchard-Sharapova Grand Slam final?
I reckon, that would make it.
Like that in a couple of years.
I think that would make it. And guys, 2017 is still, we're about halfway through 2017, and we've put together some of the best sporting moments this year. So let's take a look, and then we'll have a quick chat about that.
Broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football, and they're saying it's a catch. Oh, that's a catch. Goal. 319! Toss to White. He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! Brady has his fifth. What a comeback. Russell for three. Right down Main Street. Working off it. Russell kicks it to the corner. And he's got it. That is the stuff of legends right there. With his 42nd triple-double, Russell Westbrook has broken the single-season record established more than a half-century ago by Oscar Robertson. History rewritten in Denver. Here's out of timeouts. Adams gives it back to Russ. Deep shot! What a perfect ending to a historic day!
Porta sul mancino, va morbido dentro! Non ci credo, non ci credo, non ci credo! Sergi Roberto! Sergi Roberto! Sergi Roberto! Sergi Roberto! Sergi Roberto! 6 volte!
Oh, Danny Vukovic with the Mark Schwarzer-esque plunge down to his right. If this goes in, it's Sydney's crown. Ninkovic scores! Dreams have come true in sky blue. Sydney FC are the champions of Australia for the first time in 7 years. And again, it's victory who are the vanquished on the big day. A cruel, cruel way to lose it.
Welcome to AFL Women's. Emma King in the opening contest. Coming through hard was Hosking. Gives it off. Long raking kick from Hutchins. Inside 50. Big contest. And a great opportunity now for Jasmine Garner to go back and kick the opening goal of the game. The 22-year-old.
I think we might see Meg Hutchins do that quite a bit throughout this game.
Here's Garner for the opening goal. And there's a piece of history for Jazzy Garner.
A full stop of what's been an impressive cult performance to get things started in the NAM AFL Women's competition. It's the Blues at home with the opening set of 4 points.
The time has come for the Brisbane Lions and the Adelaide Crows. Welcome to the 2017 AFLW Grand Final, the first of a new era. Get inside 50 quickly. Hildebrand just has to get it on the boot. Can they get a mark inside 50? Here's Frederick Trobe. Couldn't quite. Crows win. The Adelaide Crows are the first AFLW premiers and the admiration of a nation indeed. This moment is for you. The Adelaide Crows AFLW premiers.
So many good moments. There's still 6 months to go, but I think you can't. Some of those moments you can't top. For me, it was Federer at the Oz Open winning. That was unbelievable. I remember we were sitting on the hill and watching it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, for me, it was just the AFLW. I think that the season as a whole was just an enormous success. I think so many people had some high expectations for it, but it just blew everything out of the water, what it was. And it was just great to see that the women are gone professional now, and they're really good players. So I think it'll grow in the next couple of years.
Yeah, mine was the Sergio Roberto goal, cap off the comeback of Barcelona against Paris. I think obviously Champions League brings that next level of world football, but that's something we haven't seen in a few decades, I don't think.
Did the commentary maybe have something to do with
it? Yeah, certainly adds to it.
Okay, guys, well, let's talk predictions just for our final show. So let's have our grand final matchup predictions for AFL.
So I said, in the first show, I said West Coast will win. I still think they'll make the grand final, and I think they'll play Adelaide, but I think Adelaide will come out on top.
Yeah, I had GWS finishing first and winning early in the season, but I think that Adelaide now will pip the Giants in the grand final.
Pete?
I think I had West Coast winning. I had Melbourne in the top 4, which I don't think is going to happen anymore, but I think we're going to see a West Coast GWS final.
Great. What about Brownlow, guys?
I can't go past Danger. I think he's just way too good, and I think he's going to go back-to-back.
Yeah, so I had Danger early, but I think I'll change over to Sloane. I think Adelaide will win enough games and he'll pull enough votes.
I think, yeah, I agree with Mitch. I think Sloane's definitely had a great season. I think he's flourishing without Dangerfield in the midfield.
And Pete, Coleman and Rising Star.
Coleman medal, Josh Kennedy. West Coast's Josh Kennedy, because, West Coast will win a lot of games. He'll kick a lot of goals. Rising Star. Oh.
Surely Andy McGrath at the Bombers.
Oh, yeah, 100%. The number 1 draft pick, yes, slipped my mind. Number 1 draft pick has been fantastic this year, so definitely across half-back, definitely Andy McGrath for me.
For the Coleman, I'm going to say Buddy. I think he's having one hell of a season, and he'll kick a couple of bags of goals to finish it off. Rising Star, I'm going to go a bit biased as well. I'm going to say Tommy Phillips got the nomination yesterday, and I think he's going to take it out.
Yeah, so I agree with Peter and Coleman. I think JJK is by far probably has kicked enough goals, and even though he's playing away, he doesn't kick as many, but I think you kick 5 goals every second game. That's plenty right there. And for my Rising Star, I'll go Tim Taranto. I think he's a very important cog in GWS's midfield, which is already star-studded. So I think he's very underrated, and come the end of the year, he'll be on top.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, and NBA? MVP?
MVP, Westbrook, and I'm not going to stick with my Celtics, even though they won yesterday, so it will be the Cavs to win, and LeBron will be the MVP for the finals.
I'm going to stick with Harden as my MVP. I think he had an incredible season. Champions, I had a Celtics-Spurs matchup in the final while they're still both alive. Or Spurs might not be in a couple of hours, but I think the Golden State Warriors will win the championship, and Kevin Durant will get the finals MVP.
Yeah, I think for my MVP, I'm going to flip it again. Westbrook had early, but now it'll be Harden. I think the matchup in round one pretty much decided who would win that. I think, Cleveland over Golden State with LeBron taking out Finals MVP.
Guys, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. You guys are just pros.
It's been great talking
snapped
sport.
up. I hope you get great jobs.
All right, so off to now our last episode of Penny Pinchers. We brought you in our first episode, and we're going to have our last episode this week with Adriana.
Our girl Adriana.
She'll be teaching us how to save money on making cakes.
This is something I'm interested in.
So today is our final episode of the Showdown, and I thought what better way to send us off than to bring you all back to where I began my segment Penny Pinchers with my life hacks. And today I'm going to show you a cake hack. I love like mud cake from like Coles Safeway, like that one in the like plastic with the lid and you eat it. I don't know, it's really good. Anyway, it's like $4 and I spend like $40 on like 2 kilos of cake that makes like nothing. So I was thinking when I had my epiphany in bed, why don't you just get the cakes from Coles and cut the tops off and then you can layer them and just mind blown. We're gonna make the icing. Ow. Here's a knife that I just happen to have right by my side, as you would. We're gonna just chuck the butter into the bowl. So when you see this will all be set up because it looks like that I did this super quickly, like, oh my gosh, she cut the butter so quick. This looks like cheese. Is there actual cheese in cheesecake? Oh my god, that would be so good. That is the butter. See, when you're doing this in the kitchen, because you'll be in the kitchen, you can just wash your hands, like, oh, quickly, next task. I'm not actually in my kitchen. By the way, thanks for coming all the way out to Flinders Street to join me for this episode. That was a shit joke, I'm sorry. My dad's really rubbing off on me. There's butter in my hand, I just showered. I'm back with the cheddar. So we're chucking all of it, all of the icing sugar. It's like powdery. We're gonna add vanilla extract that I also have right next to me. It says a teaspoon, but I don't really know what that is. I don't really have a teaspoon. Oh, I do. I don't know why I'm shocked, because I put all this here. Anyway. We're alive. That was weird. We survived that, Al, if you saw that. That was pretty scary. Shut myself. Maybe I should have mixed at the same time that my camera's on. Don't expect that taste to change your life, it's just butter. Here's an oven that here's a stove. I'm gonna have to hold this because this doesn't really work for me. Now it does, of course, because I'm trying to show you. And when it didn't work, I was... Okay. This oven's getting mad at me. Oven, it's a stove, my bad. That sounds weird. I don't use gas oven stove things. So here's some that I prepared earlier. You're pretty much gonna wanna just cut the top layer of icing off. So one of them I cut really lopsided and I didn't buy extra, so it's gonna be like 3 tiers but sort of 2.5. Anyway, okay, and now just pipe the cake. We're going to put it in the fridge for like 10 minutes and then we'll come back and do the fun part, which is decorating. Maybe that's why you pay so much for cakes. Because there's no cheap way to make it look that good. Well, at least we know that now. And on this side is our cake. I'm gonna go and take this to the person it's for, actually. So just give me a sec.
How good was that? That is the best.
Yum!
That is
and
so
here
good.
Is the man of the moment and Adriana, you wizard.
Such a good cake.
Phil!
Oh, God, guys.
Thank you so much for
my
everything.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And Adriana, this is great.
So, guys,
you want a vegan?
Yeah.
So these are vegan treats from Supernatural.
Oh, cool. Darling.
So Phil has taken us for this subject, and
this is great. Can
he's
we
just
start
made it
now?
the most
Yeah,
wonderful
please.
experience for us.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Phil. We really appreciate everything that you've done for us.
You know what? Dealing with you guys, working with you guys, and seeing how you've developed over the semester has been a wonderful thing. And I've worked with you all before in different subjects, podcast and writing and interviewing and stuff. You've all been just wonderful, and to see this and knowing too that Adriana did this all herself, like those sponges that she prepared earlier. That is the best part. I just can't believe how well you did that, Adriana. So thank you so much. And these cakes, and they're really expensive cakes too.
They look delicious.
Look, the only people who could afford a cake like this is someone who drives a BMW.
Someone who knows how to penny pinch.
Yeah.
That's right. And guys, just lastly, before we go, we'd really just like to thank our amazing crew.
Yeah.
They truly have been the glue. The glue crew.
100%. 100%.
So we've got Ben and Matt
Ow.
and Kate and Jared and Leandro and Mitch and Jared
And Liam.
and they've all been amazing. And Amal. Amal's been our studio tech, and she just fixes everything. Guys.
And Ahmed.
And Ahmed, who just produces the best stories ever. Everyone come in.
Everyone's come in. Yay.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
See you guys.
And thank you so much for tuning in.
And we're going to share.